Minister, as a member of the Business Committee, I requested this special debate on Coillte a few weeks ago because, like many who were on the protest today, many of the thousands who've now signed the Save Our Forests, Save Our Lands petition, I was absolutely horrified by the proposed deal between Coillte, public forest company owned by the people, and a vulture fund. And it is, in my opinion, a vulture fund, Gresham House. And I'll explain why I believe it is a vulture fund. And I think, to set the context for this, our forests were destroyed by colonial and imperial plunder, brought down to about 1% from a country that used to have 80% forestry, native woodland. And indeed, it was one of the objectives and missions of the revolutionaries who fought for the independence of this state, right back to Parnell and the revolutionaries who fought in 1916, was to recover and regenerate our native forests and woodlands. So it is absolutely appalling that anybody in Coillte, in government, in government departments, could think it is a good idea to have wealth asset management companies come in here and buy up potentially 100,000 hectares, because that's what Coillte are saying they are going to contribute. Yes, the first deal is 12,000 hectares, but was the whistle not blown about this? And we shall see what is going to happen. Potentially 100,000 hectares, 250,000 acres, and God knows where it could go from there. It would be bought up by profit-hungry investment funds. Now, are these people vulture funds? Well, helpfully, Coillte sent us out a question and answers. Frequently asked questions on the Gresham House deal. And I quote, "These profits," sorry, I'll start from the beginning of the sentence. "Where do the profits go? The fund is designed to generate profits from the business of forestry and timber production. These profits will be retained within the fund and from time to time be distributed to the investors in a similar way as a company distributes dividends to its shareholders." That's a corporate takeover for profit. It is very simple. And let's get a bit more specific. Ollie Hughes is the forestry managing director of Gresham House. In an article he wrote recently, he explained what Gresham House's interest was in buying up forests. And I can tell you, he didn't mention the word biodiversity. He did not mention the idea of supporting farmers. He did not mention protecting wildlife, protecting public amenities, or any of the things that ordinary people and Coillte should value as the real value of our forests and our natural heritage. What he mentioned were carbon trading credits. Carbon trading credits, which are set to multiply in value over the coming years. Where we are now, the casino that we saw wreck this economy with vulture funds and asset funds and so on in terms of housing, will now switch to the trading and speculation in carbon credits by profit-hungry international investors. That's what they are up to. And a question I might ask is, who will own these carbon credits? Maybe the Minister could inform us. Who will they benefit? But this is speculation on environmental destruction, because carbon credits are bought by countries that don't actually take real action to deal with climate mitigation, but buy themselves out of their requirement to deal with the destruction of our environment by buying up credits. And Gresham House, facilitated with public money and public premiums by the state company, will facilitate speculation on carbon credits. That's what's actually going on. And of course, that means that they want the fastest growing, cheapest, if you like, type of forestry that gains value for their investment and gains profit for them, regardless of the consequences for environment, for communities, for small farmers, for biodiversity or climate mitigation. They haven't got the remotest interest in those things. And it will exacerbate an already failed forestry model that has been dominated by the Sitka spruce industrial monocultural model that is a blight on our landscape, that has done such damage to many communities and so on, and which, by the way, is an accident waiting to happen. Just like ash dieback. If you have these massive industrial single species plantations, what happens, like ash dieback, if anything goes wrong? All of it can be wiped out. That's what happened with ash. Have you ever heard of the bark beetle, for example, that is running riot through spruce plantations all over Europe? It could potentially wipe out the entire forest estate. We already have the pine weevil doing damage to Sitka spruce plantations, to which they are extremely vulnerable. Okay, so this kind of forestry model is an accident waiting to happen. It is bad for soil, it is bad for water, it is bad for wildlife, it is bad for farmers, it is bad for biodiversity, it is bad for climate mitigation. Indeed, we had a report done for the Department of Agriculture a couple of years ago that suggested that our particular forestry model may even be a net carbon emitter. That's what we're doing. Right? And this is going to exacerbate this to the benefit of vulture funds. A fact now confirmed by, of all people, the European Commission. Not, I have to say, my favourite people, but myself and Andrew St. Ledger, who were involved in organising the protest today and the Save Our Forests, Save Our Lands campaign, received a leaked document which presumably the government have had in their possession for some time, with a damning critique by the EU Commission of our forestry model and of the failure of the government to do a proper strategic environmental assessment on their forest programme. And is that, by the way, Minister, the real reason that we haven't got state aid approval? Because they have said in this damning indictment, which we gave to the Examiner yesterday, and which is in the Examiner if you haven't read it, where they slate the environmental impact assessment provided for the government of the 1.3 billion forestry programme for failure to comply with our House Convention, failure to fully deal with the negative impacts of what they call the dominant Sitka spruce model, failure to address the problems of planting in the wrong places, on peatlands, on sensitive environments, doing planting that is damaging wildlife, aquatic life, and so on. Okay, is that the real reason? And why wasn't that in the public domain? And indeed, when exactly was all this signed off without the government supposed being aware of it? The Irish Strategic Investment Fund is a state agency. Are we seriously suggesting that the ministers and all the rest of it weren't aware of this going on? Or, for example, I don't know if this stuff has come into the public domain, that Gresham House, records reveal that a company called Gresham House Forestry General Partnership Ireland Limited was established in April of last year with Pat Cox, ex-Fine Gael TD and MEP as a non-executive director. The company also joined the Irish Association of Investment Managers, which is led by the former Fine Gael Minister Michael Darcy, who was also a Minister for State for the Department of Finance, who I'd like to remind you are the main shareholders in Oireachtas. And when we're talking about the failed model pursued by Oireachtas, who set up Oireachtas? Who set up Oireachtas? Bertie Ahern and Ray Burke. Why does it have a mandate that's all about profit and not about biodiversity, protecting and enhancing the forest estate in the interests of the people, the public, the common good, and so on? Well, of course, as we know later, Bertie Ahern ended up heading up a thing called the Irish Forestry, what they call IFI. They were based in Dunleary. And we had to go marching in 2013. It wasn't Pat Rabbitt who stopped the plan then of the Troika and the government signed in a Memorandum of Understanding to sell off the entire harvesting rights of Coillte, and one of the people who was looking at that was a fund headed up at the time by Bertie Ahern, possibly purchasing those harvest rates, but thousands of people marched in the Save Our Forests demonstration, and that was overturned, and the government were forced into a humiliating but good retreat. I just want to finish by saying this. Minister, the numbers are going to swell. The numbers are going to swell unless you get out of this deal and end such deals. Has there even been a strategic environment assessment done of this deal, by the way, of this deal, to see the damage it could do to the environment? So get out of this deal and reform Coillte.
Thank you, Deputy Tammany Challen.